What's up, Nubians? Welcome to techn00bians, part of the Geekish Network. This is your weekly deep dive into video games steeped in blackness. I'm your host, Cherie. With me today, I have our man with the plan, Chuck,
What's up, everyone? I'm
our
here
producer,
again.
our producer and deducer, Shanae,
Hey, folks.
our marksman engineer, Leon,
What's up, people?
artist extraordinaire, Ryan,
What's up?
and Travis.
What it do?
Travis, do you not have a name because you are all things?
Travis is all things.
Or
at all
nothing.
times.
Or nothing. Like, I'll answer to both.
They're just not words.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, techn00bians is your weekly go-to video game live stream and podcast hosted by Black technology and industry professionals, where we discuss the what, where, when, and how you can get into this world of technology, particularly into video games. We are here to inspire, sustain, and nurture successful creative technologists in the pursuit of Black excellence and commitment to technology and content development. So, as we usually do, let's kick these things off with some tech and gaming news. We're gonna start here. Shanae, I think you've got a story for us. Why don't you kick this off for us?
I do have a story, and I just want to start this off by saying that we apparently, even though I thought this was the darkest timeline, this is the timeline that has like the most awesome theme parks showing up right now. So I don't know if that's a proper trade-off for like, hey, systemic racism, but you get to have a Pokemon theme park. So there's a new Pokemon theme park that has been announced in Japan, and it is supposed to specifically celebrate nature. It is called Pokemon Wonder. It is 48,000 square feet, which I live in Northern California. I don't know what 48,000 square feet looks like. It's probably like my house 48,000 times though.
Roughly.
But it is filled with Pokemon. And I know that Travis is as excited about this as I am, because I know how much he loves Nintendo and tiny little pocket monsters.
Mhm.
And it's going to be located in a place called Inagi City, which I don't know where Inagi City is, but it says it's less than 30 minutes from Shinjuku. So that means you can do some karaoke and then head over and see some Pokemon, whichever order that you want to do it in.
Tokyo.
There you go. Hopefully you can like swing by and check out like Super Mario Land too. Like you could just have a Nintendo filled life right
Have you
now.
ever, like, honestly, like, imagined what your own private hell would look like?
What does your private hell look like, Travis? Will it be filled with nature and Pokemon? That's a hell?
Man, have you been to the forest in Japan?
I'm pretty sure
Suicide Force.
that's what it would look like.
Listen, so
But those Pokemon are really cute, Travis, and they're biodegradable.
And here's the thing, Travis. Okay, so for anyone who hasn't been to Japan, like I love going to Japan. It is one of my favorite countries to go to for nothing more than it's so different from the way that America's laid out.
Yep.
You can. There's one station you get off at, which I can't remember the name of right now. What's the name of that station? You get off to go. You turn left. You're in Harajuku, which is like the fashion district.
Shibuya?
Yeah, well, it's like fashion district of like
Harajuku.
yeah.
Harajuku and Shibuya right next to each other.
And then you turn right, and then suddenly you're in the middle of a forest, and it is like you're in the middle of Tokyo, and there's this ancient forest that's been around who knows how long, right? And it's just like you can't see any of the things that we know as Tokyo, like the big bright lights and the fact it feels like you're transported to a different place. Plus Pokemon.
No.
And then you can go see a Gundam. You can hop back on the train, go another 40 minutes. You're next to a Gundam.
Yep.
And the Statue of Liberty.
Travis, I
What?
think you're a hater.
Oh, later.
Yeah, I do have to say that's one of the things I love about Japan is that juxtaposition of like the old kind of traditional style and like this new modern pop culture or whatever. Like you go to like a this shrine or temple or whatever, and there's like a vending machine that gives you like your fortune. I love stuff like that, and Japan does it better than anyone. And I love like this Pokemon forest really kind of seems like it merges those. I want to go. I'm sorry.
Look, the only thing I've seen from Pokemon that got me amped was that YouTube video of that dude who was like in like slippers or something, like rocking out to Pokemon. Like, it was he just did this Pokemon cover, and it literally.
Oh yeah, the guy did the song, the guy that's singing.
Yeah, and he's just like doing this the whole time while he's singing.
Yeah, I posted that.
I was like, I want to play that game. Can I play that one?
I mean, what is a more enduring story of children than Pokemon? You take an underage child, you turn him loose in the forest with wild animals, and you give him a baby rabbit to protect himself. I mean, I think that's a great message.
Pikachu is an electric rat. I will let you know. By the way, guys,
he's
It's also in
rodent.
Japan, which is probably like one of the safest places on the planet. With there's zero
To
crime.
go around with a radioactive rat.
There's nothing like over there.
Okay.
Super safe.
All right.
I mean, I
That's
think
what I
it's
want to
like-
be surrounded with.
I mean, honestly, like, you know, the I said, if you have not been to like various forests in Japan, various shrines in Japan, it is somewhat of a magical experience because you are in one of the most technologically advanced countries on the planet, and then suddenly you go back and you see like you get to see the history, you get to see like the before times and preserved and still beautiful, still integrated with society and technology, by the way. So totally different from America. We like to preserve things and pretend like that F train up in San Francisco is ridiculous. It needs air conditioning. But it's what I find this to be really interesting about this story is like as you're walking through this forest, like you can see, like you can imagine how the idea for Pokemon came up. You can imagine like, oh, what if there was an Oddish over there, or what if there's like a, you know, maybe there'd be Butterfree over here, and they just made they just did that. They put that in the forest, so you don't have to imagine it. You're just walking around and then you suddenly see a hidden Pokemon, and that, I don't know. I think that just makes me smile.
It's legit.
Did you
Just
see the
don't
It
go to
pictures
makes me
of them?
smile because it's
Did you
so
see the
different
pictures
from
of
the.
them?
Well, it's so different than the Super Mario Land, right? Where you're transported into the Mushroom Kingdom and there's, you know, all this, like, there's, you know, all the bright colors and all the sounds, that kind of stuff, which is also awesome in its own right. But this is meant to celebrate the forest and nature, and you're just walking through nature, and every once in a while, oh, there's a, you know, fill in the blank Pokemon, right?
Yep.
As an FYI, travelers, please do not confuse this with the Suicide Forest. That is a much different place. So the Suicide Forest is different than the Pokemon Forest. Make sure you get those straight.
I think you're in the mountains if you find
All
the
right.
Suicide Forest.
And I think we're going to jump on to the next story here. So I just want to do a little bit of a callback here. We probably, I don't know, it was probably a few episodes ago. We've talked about privacy a few times on here. And we talked before about like how different companies like serve up ads to you, maybe based on like your proximity to other people. Cause there was a story of like a guy who like went and visited his mom, and then he started getting toothpaste ads of the brand of toothpaste that his mom used, and he was trying to figure out how this happened. And he had this long, really interesting Twitter thread about it. And in the thread, though, he kind of concluded, he's like, yeah, a lot of people say like, you know, that your phones listen to you and stuff like that, but it really isn't. It's just like this very complicated, like these algorithms that are just working overtime to like basically match your data with other people's data, your location data, match all this stuff up to be able to figure out how to serve you ads. And I mentioned this because there was a story that was out today or out this week on CNET that said a judge gives a go-ahead to Google Assistant privacy lawsuit, which essentially says, yeah, your phone actually was listening to you all this time. So essentially, anyone who has like an assistant like Alexa or Google or I don't know, Siri, if anyone still uses Siri,
Accidentally.
yeah, well, that's the other thing, right? Like we've all had that experience where you're talking to somebody and then so your Google Assistant or whatever starts talking in the background and you're like, shut up, I'm not talking to you, right?
Happening every week.
Yeah, it happens so often. I've had my Alexa was triggered by my TV so often, I just unplugged Alexa.
You need to stop watching whatever you're watching, triggering your Alexa. You will get canceled in this culture.
Stuff, yeah. And so the reason this lawsuit's come about is because Google, like they'll take, like, you know, there's that wake word and those accidental times where your assistant wakes up. Well, Google still uses the recordings that happen as a result of those inadvertent, like, I guess, you know, waking up of your assistant, and uses those to serve you ads. And so there's some plaintiffs, excuse me, who are suing Google because they're like, yo, you shouldn't be using the content of these private conversations when I was not trying to alert your, you know, to wake up the assistant. And Google actually has it in their privacy policy. They're like, yeah, we're going to use like, you know, any kind of content that we hear and record to, you know, for advertising purposes. And Google asked for the lawsuit to be thrown out. The judge has just said, nope, you can move forward with this lawsuit. But I thought that was interesting because I was like, yeah, for everyone who thought, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, your phone can't really hear you, all this other stuff. No, I mean, actually, these companies, this technology has been there, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just a matter of whether companies are using it.
Mm-hmm.
Leon, I think you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah. So there's a couple thoughts in here. First is that a lot of times, and I know Apple phones work this way. It's a little different from Google. Apple phones have a buffer that's always listening. So it's not that the applications were listening to you. They were just saying, "Hey, iPhone, what's in that buffer?" And they were sending it back to their services. But so the most important thing anyone can do when you install an app on your phone and it asks, "Can I use the camera, the microphone, whatever?" Say no. Just no. Just always say no. And then if you try to use that app for an intentional purpose, then enable that, right? So if you're on Facebook Messenger and you actually are trying to have a conversation, enable it, and then when that conversation is over, turn it back off, right? So be intentional about the capabilities of these applications. That won't help you in the case of Google and the operating system, but it will at least, like Google is at least a big enough company that they can get sued, right? Whereas some little tiny app company that's stealing all your data might be sitting in China, you may not be able to sue them anyway, right? So just be very intentional about what you put on your phone and recognizing that your phone is a treasure trove of data. And the other thing, I mean, with Google, just keep in mind, Google gives Android away for free. Why why did they do that? I wonder. It's like they're getting something out of that. Just
It's true.
I'm glad you mentioned it because I was about to switch over to the Google phone. I was
I
about
mean,
to
any
do that this week.
consolation, everyone has a potential of doing it, so it doesn't matter.
I think I think this is interesting because I remember the promise of the future, like when when we were in like the old days, right? Like the
The pre-internet
80s,
days.
for example, right? Where your where your computer would know this about you and your computer would know that about you and it would do this and it would do that. That's what's happening, people.
Mhm.
Okay. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is that people sort of resent the fact that, in addition to that, it's being monetized
Mm-hmm.
in a way, right? And that's sort of the trade-off you get, right? Is if your technology knows you, the people behind that technology knows you, and I think that what it's surfacing, at least to me, is a need, and I've heard this term used before, just ethics, right? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
kind of ethical behavior do we attach to technology to let people feel like they're a little safer, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, if I'm holding a device like my phone, for example,
Mm-hmm.
if I had the same assurances like that like the Food and Drug Administration has on a product that I pick up and I eat, like this phone won't do this and it won't do that and it won't do this. Okay, great. Then I can talk about whatever I want to talk about. I think there needs to be that sort of sanctifying sort of technology shield around people sometimes, that they know that, yes, information is being collected, but it is being used thusly. And
Yes.
I think that maybe that's a need for something on a government level.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
When we talked about the future, we never talked about people monetizing our privacy. And I think that's the issue. If Isaac Asimov would have made that book back in '82, we would have definitely been skeptical all the way to today.
Mhm.
We didn't mind them a computer knowing our privacy because it was still ours. The computer is not human; it's not going to spread that rumor. But now it's spreading the rumor and then selling me products based on the rumor it's spreading. That's the
Yep.
problem.
And I think the other part of it is, and this goes back to what I think the callback to like the previous episode when we talked about this, what also gets under people's skin is when that technology, when that like information is being used by that technology in inelegant ways. Like the result is inelegant. Like you notice it, you start, it doesn't feel magical. It feels like a computer.
Mm-hmm.
Like when the gentleman went and like visited his mom and suddenly it's like it's advertising her toothpaste. He's like, wait a second, why is it doing this? And he could like, you could see behind the veil. And then it sort of just felt a little gross at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think honestly, like I think there is probably a nexus point where as technology continues to improve and we do get to start to do a better job of the smoke and mirrors, I think people start to ignore that. But whenever it subsides, the big strong wind, it blows the smoke away, you start to see behind it, you're gonna get these flare-ups where people are just like, wait a second, that ain't right.
Yeah,
As much as I hate when this happens, I'm going to have to agree with Travis here, in that we do.
I thought so. The thing you hated that happens was going to be the security stuff.
No,
Like, no, it's agreeing with Travis.
Go on.
That's not as
I
bad as
also hate
agreeing
when
with
that
Travis.
happens. Oh,
But we do need some kind of privacy bill of rights.
Yeah.
We're starting to see elements of that happening in Europe with GDPR and kind of fence posting data in certain nations. So we're starting to see this occur already. The bar is too low for companies to use and monetize this information. They're going to use it unless they are told not to.
Yep.
And the problem is that government and regulation is too slow and unsophisticated to keep up, right? They would start, right? If they were to start today, they would start regulating MySpace, right? Oh yeah, we're gonna get MySpace under control. And looking at them like,
finally. It's so true. And the other thing I just mentioned, just to kind of piggyback off what y'all were saying, is, I think the other thing that rubs people the wrong way is when tech companies kind of like they use double talk around it. Like we know that this is happening, you know what I mean? But they'll say things like, we don't record user conversations, but it's like, yeah, maybe you don't record it, but the data is available and you use the data that's already there, right?
yeah, your phone doesn't listen to you,
Yeah,
or
but
the
like
apps
we
don't
don't
listen to you.
retain
Like,
audio
or-
recordings, and it's
or-
like saying we don't retain it doesn't mean that it's not recorded. Like they do like little double talk, and I think that just puts it in bad face. So when people find out like find out the truth, or really like actually come to accept the truth there, it just rubs you the wrong way. Because like you said, Travis, I mean, this technology, this is what we always wanted, right? This is what we hoped for, but we just didn't we didn't expect it to kind of come about in this seemingly nefarious way. It doesn't have to be nefarious, honestly. It doesn't
and
have
believe it or not, like people are willing to trade their privacy,
Oh, yeah.
and some of their security
convenience.
for convenience. And
Yeah.
so when things like this happen, like for like the Google thing specifically, I think is really interesting because it's not a case of somebody like intentionally activated the Google Assistant and it listened to them. It's like, oops, I didn't mean to, and it still listened to it and still did the same thing. That's what feels like.
yeah.
Like it feels like, oh, I accidentally put someone on the CC line for an email, and you took that information and used it. Like it feels
Exactly.
So I'm wondering.
good.
I'm wondering. Does WhatsApp have my nudie pics?
They do have your nudie pics.
They do.
They
They
do.
encrypted and they just it's in a cloud somewhere. Or,
It's in their cloud.
Welcome to the future.
Yeah.
It's all
Ryan, I have your nudie
you
pics.
got
Wait,
my,
guys.
just say Travis
You
got
rated.
it. I just want to WhatsApp.
Rated.
Absolutely.
You
My
rated.
bad.
I think
So tighten up.
Yeah.
I think one way to illustrate this, right? You think back to Star Trek Next Generation, and you've got Picard. He's like tea, Earl Grey, hot, and the tea appears. But imagine if he said tea, Earl Grey, hot, and the computer would be like, "Would you like to buy a new cup?" Right? That's where we are.
Yeah.
That's a good one. All right.
And the thing about it is the only thing that scares me about this is you becoming like more and more a slave to your own algorithm, right? To the point where there's no randomness anymore to your existence, right? You get so dialed in and so locked in that it just feeds you into being that person instead of giving you the ability to see other things,
You're saying one time you're just gonna walk up to the replicator and you're not gonna say tea Earl Grey hot. You're gonna be like, tea with spiders, just because you want to feel alive.
Basically.
Why do you want that to be advertised to you?
Spider tea.
Yeah, just to see what happened, and it explodes, and you're like,
Okay, I don't have a good segue from spider tea, but let's move on to the next story here. Leon, you've got something for us.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm a little disturbed by the spider tea, but so it turns out that they're releasing a director's cut of the excellent game Ghost of Tsushima, which is great, right? Like it's as a gamer, more of a great game is always a good thing, but it's really making me think about content. Like we're seeing a lot of games right now, like we're seeing a lot of last generation games that are getting texture updates, and it's like it's the PS5 Xbox One S version, right? You know, where they rev up the detail a little bit. And part of this is because content is so expensive, right? When it's taken 2-3 years to build these games, and the pipelines are dry because the other games are having delays because they're struggling to get things out there. Like, hey, how can we remix and put things out there? Now, this isn't new, right? We used to see like Xbox Platinum hits and things like that, where there was this other chance, right? Because only so many people play your game, so many people miss it. This is a chance to inject new marketing. But it seems like that delta is getting shorter and shorter. I'm like, director's cut, like, dang, that game just like it just came out, you know, I think it was Q3, Q4 of last year, and now we're getting director's cuts. So I get that we're on a console boundary at this point, but it really seems like there's a lot of effort going on to remix, you know, see new marketing. And part of this is Game Pass and other things, and they're just saying, hey, there's new ways to inject this. Now, as a gamer that missed some of that, like, you know, like I didn't play the last Star Wars game, but then when it went on Game Pass, I was like, oh, cool, I can play it now, right? So there was kind of a second chance for me. So I think it makes sense from a gamer perspective, but it's just interesting seeing this content trend.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a trend at all. I
Well,
think it's same as it ever was. I mean, you know, like how many like you know, when people talk about revisions all the time, I think about how many times I bought Star Wars, and I get mad at everybody, including myself. I think I have bought Star Wars at least 20 times.
But you don't think the delta is shorter?
Since when though? You know, and I think that maybe that corresponds with, you know, digital delivery almost being, if not the same, but you know, day and date. So I think it's been possibly the same since then. And you know, when you can actually, you know, update something and push it to everyone, all the rules change, and I'm here for it. And I think Ghost of Tsushima is I'm a little sensitive to that title because it literally was like one of the best games on the PlayStation 4, but it also came at an interesting time, right, between the PS4 and PS5. And so you know that they took a look at that PS5 and they said, do we delay? Or do we ship now? Right? And they said, oh, we'll catch it later, right? And so that's exactly, you know, that's exactly what happened. So they released it, you know, and hey, I have never platinumed a game before, but this was the first game that made me go, I think I just might.
Yeah.
Okay.
This director's cut, this is coming on PS5? Or is it gonna be,
it's on both.
Yeah,
Both.
okay. I mean, this
there's
is
a
also
price
another
difference.
Yeah, it also makes it another reason for them to advertise, hey, go get a PS5. You know?
If
like,
you can. If you can.
That's true too, right?
Also, it brings back like Persona 5. Like Persona 5 came out and they gave you 150 hours of gameplay in that game. They turned around like a year later and dropped Persona 5 Royal. Then say, hey, we're gonna give you an extra 20-30 hours on top of that.
Yeah.
And change the whole entire fight system. So you have to go back and do the same exact game, slightly different, with a whole new fight system now, because we decided we're gonna add it in there. And guess what? I was one of the people that bought it twice.
Yeah, I don't complain about this. I'm like, I mean, I've bought The Legend of Zelda basically on every platform it ever comes out on. Like Nintendo just announced like a new Game and Watch thing with Zelda, and I'm like, do I need this?
I'm about to buy Skyward Sword again.
But I'm gonna buy it, and I'm gonna sit it under my TV, and it's gonna be a little clock with like Link running around and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of hard to. I mean, like, I've seen a lot of the response online, and people were just like, you know, why didn't they give us for free? Which gets into the whole argument about like, hey, it's people had to work on it. So, like, it ain't free. But then there was also the like, you know, hey, why is it so soon and all kind of stuff. And I'm just like, well, you know what? I used to buy every single game at launch and then felt this obligation to play every single game as soon as I could. But I've been playing Ghost of Tsushima. I haven't finished it. I'll probably never finish it. If I do ever get close to finishing it, I'm like, you know what? That content's going to be there next year too.
I don't understand this. I don't understand it. I don't understand this whole content thing, right? It's like you getting mad at
They gave
Burger
it to
King
you
because
before I
now they're
wanted it.
putting bacon on a Whopper. You know, didn't you have your Whopper? Was it good? Okay,
Yes, yeah.
now there's one with bacon. Come try that one. You know, I should get that one for free. Why? Because you bought it last time. Get out of here.
Go on,
But,
Leon.
but there's some, there's
Go
some,
ahead, Leon.
sorry about that. There's some interesting psychology to that, right? So on Xbox, at one point, people were putting the DLC because they had the art assets. They shipped it on the main SKU, and then when you bought the DLC, it was an unlock. And the unlock was like a half-second download, and the users figured out real quick, like, well, wait a minute, you just unlocked some junk, right? Like that stuff was, I already paid for those assets. Now, yes, just because the asset is on the disc doesn't mean the gameplay was there, the testing, and all the other things that people had to do afterward. But there was a perception of value that the users felt violated by. They said, no, that's not going to work. I already paid for that. So there is a needle to be threaded about how you push this content out and the perception of what I have paid for versus what you want me to pay for again. It's really not that simple.
Yeah, and I think that like we could probably do like a whole episode around the whole DLC conversation because it is very. I mean, there are definitely some really strong emotions on both sides with it. I'm just gonna I'm gonna put a pin in that so we can come back to that because I think that would be a really interesting.
I really want to talk about on this DLC. I have very strong.
That's why I was just like, well, let's put a pin on that because I know we got to come back to that. Let's get to our last story we have here. Ryan, you have a story for us.
Yeah. So I got itchy hands, so that means something's gonna happen.
Yo.
So rain on me in a minute. So who likes free money? I do. I know
everybody likes free money.
Likes
I mean,
free money, right?
Is it free?
It's free. It's free. It's free.
I remember you saying you get something for me for free when it goes on sale. Like,
I got you. You already got some free picks, so I get you. We'll talk more about that later. So anyway, Google announces $50 million in grants for HBCUs.
Nice. What is HBCU? Explain to the people that don't understand HBCUs.
Historically Black colleges and universities. That's what it is. So basically, Google announced that it'll be giving 10 historically Black colleges and universities a total of $50 million in grant funds with a total of with a goal of addressing the diversity gap in tech. I was kind of hoping and wishing they could throw some of that money towards us, like
professionals already there.
Techn00bians.
Keep me in this industry, y'all.
Holla.
You literally address the gap in diversity, in tech. So I mean, this is what we talk about. But what I was also wondering, I was also thinking, is this like some form of reparations or something?
Nah, because there's way too many criteria.
Google taking the initiative to hey, let me give them some money.
Google's taking the tax write-off.
I think it's that part.
Well, look, it's a lot of things, right? Like, just because we're Black doesn't mean we don't use technology, or that we're less worthy, or whatever. And the thing about it is that a lot of times when you look at these new and emerging markets, and it doesn't matter. It seems like to me historically what it is. You start with Black people first. It seems that way, right? So even if Google's getting to us last, you know what I'm saying? They recognize at least that there's money to be made, right? And so look, if you're actually investing that time, and you're investing, in that demographic, it's bound to be pay dividends if you stick with it. I mean, you ask Apple, how they feel about students now, right? I mean, Apple went after students in a big way, like long time ago. Now, like it's almost just a thing, right? You're a student. Where's your Mac?
So the grants are the article also mentioned that the grants, the $50 million in grants, they're the largest gifts of unrestricted funds ever awarded to these colleges. Unrestricted funds, in other words, they can use the money as they see fit. So
Yeah.
they're going to be using them. Each college is going to be using them differently for specific uses or whatever like that. Uh, hey, I run Comic Pro Boot Camp. I'm black.
You're like,
Holla once again, holla.
I am a historically black institution.
You're historic, right? In black.
It's historic and black.
And you should be institutionalized.
Exactly.
I think we can't overstate the value of this to these schools. And for one, Tuskegee and Xavier University, for example, were listed. And I know a lot of very senior and very talented developers and engineers and program managers at Microsoft came from those schools. So providing those resources there is great. But I also want to caution, writing the check, again, a check of this magnitude is huge, but I hate to be that guy, but we also have to say what else, right? It's also important that they prove, okay, are you hiring? Are you going to make sure that you're doing the appropriate recruiting at these things? Are you going to Afrotech? Are you going to National Society of Black Engineers? Are you doing things to get these people in your company? When they're at your company, are you developing them as managers and senior leaders and putting people in the vice presidency seats on the boards, right? It's easy, like the check is the easy deal, right? But when you're picking who's going to get that promotion, that gets a lot harder. So I think this is an important step. These schools need the money. I totally support it. But if they really are about this, right? If they really want to improve diversity, then we'll see it in their hiring.
Yeah, I mean, the solution's definitely systemic, right? Because the problems are systemic, and once you start looking at things that way, yeah, you're right, Leon. Like you're 1,000,000% correct. I mean, it's like maybe the check stops the bleeding to some degree, right? But you have to start, but then it's the whole circulatory system that that you have to keep in motion, right? And we see it all the time. I mean, you're happy when someone has a come up, but that's not the end of it. You got to be there to reach down. You got to be there to reach to your left or to your right and help all those people inside that organization, so it makes that circulatory system we're talking about. But
yeah, absolutely. One of the things we often talk about in this industry is what is it, the number of black and brown folks in this industry, actually number of black folks in this industry, I think it's less than 2%.
It's
been less than 2% for many, many, many years. Even as they've had like an increase in the number of diversity, equity, inclusion based programs and people paying attention to it now, and like trying to make actual efforts toward and creating like heads of diversity and that sort of thing. But the numbers are staying the same. Same thing for women in the industry, by the way. The number doesn't change. It hovers around 20%. And there's been like, out of all the different like identity groups like that are courted within tech, women is probably the group that is like the most money is put behind. But the number stays the same. And we have to ask ourselves why that is. And it's not just like, well, math is too hard for lady brains, or maybe black people aren't really interested in technology. It's not, those are not the answers. Those are like, that's the racism coming out. Don't let the racism get you, y'all. like
right.
We rested on, and that's what we rested on historically.
Yeah, but we keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to turn my nose up at like Google dollars and stuff like that. I'm glad that they're actually putting some time and effort and money into this thing, but it cannot be the exact same thing that always happens, because we're not talking about, this is not just a front of the pipeline problem. It is a leaky pipeline problem. There are black and brown folks and women who are like, and LGBTQIA and folks who are in this industry who are historically marginalized, and they get in the pipeline and then everything's kind of a mess, and it affects them more than everyone else. How many times have I been like the only woman on a team, and they take this woman, they drop them into like this very toxic culture and say, oh, don't worry, she's going to fix it. Is she going to fix it? That sounds like an additional job for. And that is also deeply affecting that person's like mental health, physical health, just their time and well-being and all that kind of stuff. And they leave and they're like, oh crap, every time we hire a woman she leaves. Like, well, that's not the woman's fault.
Must be, yeah. I wonder what's consistent in this equation. Like, what's the thing that hasn't changed? Oh
Yes.
man.
Yeah, I mean,
What happens
yeah,
when you
just
have
because you exist isn't enough, right? I mean, it isn't. I mean, I met Sinead when we worked together, right? And so, you walk into product development. I think things are okay. Now we just here.
We learned quickly, didn't we?
We learned quickly that that was not the case, right? And so,
Mhm.
yeah, so it's not enough that you actually get up the bat, right? You have to
Mhm.
keep that.
Yeah.
You have to keep that party going.
Yeah, it's so true. And I'm really hoping like that was one like sis, you said exactly like my sentiment with it, which is I don't want to, I don't want to like, turn my nose up at like what Google's doing because a lot of people are not doing it. And I do appreciate them giving recognizing that we need to recruit from more than just Ivy League. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
everyone, like all these places will be like, "Oh, why are our companies so white? And we only recruit from white areas and white institutions, stuff like that." So I'm like,
And they're all located on the West Coast in places
Yeah.
like Seattle.
And
Yeah.
let me
so
just
like I
add to
appreciate. So I was just going to mention, like, I appreciate that they're doing that. I just also want to make sure that they're also dedicating another $50 million towards making a culture that is inclusive. So once people get there, they don't feel like, oh, you know what, like I can't deal with this. Like this is just way too much.
This
I'm out.
goes into another story they had
Well-
this week of women of color vacating out of Google. So you're
I-
gonna
I just-
educate them, get them in, and push them right back out and say, "We tried."
yeah.
They just can't hang
Here's
with the boys.
here's my point on all of this is that when you start coding, when you start designing, when you start executing, software, it is a reflection of the creators. It really is. And up until now, you've gotten that reflection of those creators, and I think it's high time that there's some other creators that take the forefront. But you have to empower them. You have to enable them. You have to give them the ability to actually, reflect themselves, electronically, because just for no other reason, but for other people to see that they're not alone, right? And I think that's where the growth is. I think tech wise is going to come from. It's going to come from some real unexpected places,
Mhm.
real soon. I really think that.
Yeah, totally agree. Thank you for that, Travis. So now we're going to move on to our main roundtable discussion. And I think today we want to talk a little bit about, like, this was a topic that came up last week. I think in one of the, I don't remember which story we were talking about. I think it was actually about Ratchet and Clank, right?
That was it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and about them not crunching the whole time.
Yeah, them not like what a concept, not killing their workers to try and just ship a game, right? And all of us have been like in the industry or industry adjacent for like for long periods of time, right? We all have some experience here with crunch, and so I wanted to talk about this, basically make this like I was like let's take some time to actually dive into this a little bit more deeply, right? And talk about um, that whole culture of crunch that we find in the gaming industry, because it is just like I came from EA. It was just kind of an expected part of the culture, right? I mean, I will just mention just to kind of kick off this conversation. I was at EA for 12 years. I was started off in the testing group, and it was basically like that was expected, right? Like, I mean, we would actually see schedules when we were about to start a project that had like us working on the weekends, and it's like, okay, if you've already got like a 7-day week planned out, where do you go when shit hits the fan? You have no buffer.
You don't go home.
You don't go home. Like I've had
don't go.
Yeah, I've had times where I slept at the studio. I had multiple times where it's like, oh, we're trying to ship the game. Somebody finds a terrible game breaking bug at 2 in the morning, and they tell us, hey, we're gonna get a new build at 4 in the morning. Clock out or something, but like don't leave. Just stay here.
Yeah.
And we end up working like 24-hour days. This was a very regular occurrence.
Yeah.
That happened with EA, and it's happened with lots of game companies. So I just want to kind of like set this up. Maybe we can just talk about some of our experiences here with the crunch culture and how do game companies get out of it. How do we
I,
make the Ratchet and Clank a repeatable process?
before we get too deep in there, I just want to say one thing about our jobs. Period.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of people think about jobs in the way the industrialized revolution really, like it's on the factory. You go to the factory, you make the things on a conveyor belt, they come off and you assemble them, and everybody gets toasters and cars and houses and so on and so forth. And we're not in that age anymore. We are in the information age,
Mm.
where it's you're really you're you're relying on people to be creative, and sometimes creativity does not come when you think it does. Sometimes you're on toilet. Sometimes you're in the shower. Sometimes you're doing other things that are completely unrelated to what you're trying to do, and it hits you, right? How do you plan for that, right? And so a lot of times it's very hard to do what we do because it's hard to do what we do. Um, and so I just want to set that as a stage for a lot of this, because I feel sometimes we're trying to take this round peg and put it in a square hole sometimes, and it's not exactly.
I noticed that all of Travis's eureka moments happen in the bathroom,
Wow.
in the shower, on the toilet. Like,
What up, Trav?
Hey, you
That's
take
where
your
he goes
zen
to
where you get it,
cry.
yeah,
That's where
yeah,
he
you
goes to
take your zen where
cry.
you get it.
That's
That's
where
a
he
most
goes to cry.
peaceful
no,
place
I
in
think,
the house.
but Travis says, "Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ryan, were you saying something?"
No, go ahead.
He
But
said
no, but
it's the most peaceful place in the house. That's what he said.
it is the place where you can get a little piece quiet. Yeah. No, no, but, like what
I don't
Travis
have kids, so every place is the most peaceful place in my house. Throwing that out there.
most peaceful place in my house is that deck out back, which you guys will see one day.
Oh,
But it's real nice.
stunting,
But no,
stunting.
no, for real though, like what Travis said has some, it does have merit, because like we're
Mhm.
in a creative industry, and we're challenged like I feel like games is it's in a lot of ways it's uniquely creative, a lot of ways not uniquely, not unique, but it's also like uniquely creative in that it's a combination of art and science, right? It's understanding
Mhm.
technology and getting it to a place, like bending it to your will so you can find this mythical thing called fun. And then be able to like institute that, make it intuitive, make it repeatable, make it something that people want to do, not just have fun once, but hey, we've got to create a loop so that you do the exact same thing over and over and over again, and it's fun for like 8 to 10 hours,
Mm.
right? So that's really hard. And there is science actually behind why people do come have those eureka moments like in the bathroom or that kind of stuff. It's often because your brain is thinking about other things.
Yeah.
and and your lower level functions are like, hey, actually, why don't you just make them jump higher? And you're like, oh, of course. Why didn't I think of that 4 months ago?
It's
I
also
keep getting tagged by the
peaceful because
bedroom.
nobody else want to be in there with you.
I like how we've had
That's from working with
moments
so
and
many men.
tea spiders today. I love how we've had bathroom eureka moments and tea spiders today. So let's keep going with that.
Yeah.
Because like the game industry is all bathroom eureka.
And when you have a really good cry in the bathroom, usually your best ideas come.
and you walk
So you
out, and you're
cry in
like,
the shower,
guys,
cry in the toilet.
guys,
got
I
this
have it.
idea.
I know how to.
That's
I know
what
how to
Travis.
make the
That's
game
what
fun.
Travis is
And
falling
then everyone's
apart.
just like, yeah, the studio closed 15 minutes ago while you were in the bathroom crying. So,
Yeah, but I got this brilliant idea now. I
the
got
other
all the
side,
tears out.
but the other side of what Travis is saying too, I think is like this is why game industry is so interesting,
Oh,
unique,
man.
and it's also so difficult. Like we talk about
Mhm.
making games,
Mm-hmm.
like the one of the things I always repeat to folks, and like making games is hard. It's like one of the hardest things. It feels like, oh yeah, I can do that. Those lazy developers, they might as well. The reason they couldn't get that game out on time or give me that content or do this other thing or add online was because they were lazy. Guys, let me tell you, it's hard.
Yep.
It's just really freaking hard to get like a 20-person team or a 300-person team in mental alignment, in schedule alignment, and have that all meet with your budget and your timelines and your external commitments, and then be able to ship the thing. Like it's really freaking hard. That said, it's it is so easy for us to fall back on a lot of these sort of crutches that we have. Like the most common crutch that we have in the game industry that gets us punched in the face by external folks too is crunch. Like it is just a lot of times we just refer to it like, oh, it's just a thing that happens in the industry. You just have to get okay with crunch. And I think what started the conversation last week was like, actually, Ratchet and Clank said you don't. Like a company called
Yeah.
Insomniac said, hey, go home and get some sleep.
Yeah. Yes. It's funny that company says that. It's funny that company says
hey,
that.
you, Rip Van Winkle.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah.
Because when you're staying up making these, like trying to make this game while you're in your insomnia, you're making bugs, all right? Like go home, get some sleep,
But
go
I think
talk to your family and stuff. Go
I
ahead.
think there are two key components of that, though, right? Which is causing this problem and also illustrates why Insomniac's getting away with it. First is that way too often we're time boxed. You have to make holiday no matter what. You have to make console launch no matter what, right? So we have this unmovable goal that you have to hit. It has to be there, right? And breaking that goal is very brave, right? Like Microsoft very bravely punted on Halo because they were like, we can't get this wrong. Right.
Oh, you're gonna make a whole lot of people angry by saying that sentence.
Right. We'll lose more money by torpedoing the franchise than we will by moving it. But most times you can't do that. The other thing is that most games are undercapitalized, right? Because of all the things that we're saying about it's difficult to find fun. It's like filming a movie where I have to invent the camera is part of the movie making process, right? And then film the movie with the camera that I just invented. And we don't pay people enough for it, and we don't have enough time to extend the date. So we just say, we're just gonna just burn you guys to the ground so that we can meet the unmovable date. And then I would say then the corollary to all of this is what's called the Mythical Man Month, right? Which is often illustrated by 9 women can't make a baby in a month. I don't care how many women you add to the development team, it's gonna take 9 months for that baby to come out. And what that means practically for those that understand is when you put too many engineers on a problem, they start getting in each other's way, right? Like you get some speed increases over time, but you reach a point where adding more engineers actually costs more. So you just need time. You need time to get it right. Going back to my original point about we're time boxed, right? And that's what creates this disaster.
Yes. I love whenever anyone who's not me quotes the Mythical Man Month, written in 1978, by the way. I actually saw like an original copy of it at the local computer history museum like several years back, and I took a picture and I was very happy. Not only is like 9 women can't make a baby in a month, the fastest way to make a late project later is to add more people to it.
Add more people. Yep. Absolutely.
And it's so often, I mean, it really is just like a function of just just bad planning. I mean, honestly, right? I mean, like for example, like what you're talking about, Leon, we're like, this has to ship by holiday, right? Like when I worked at EA, we had a lot of sports properties, so it's like we needed Madden to ship like these specific times to like time it with like different seasons, like for sport. There, like when we did NASCAR, like all these licenses are attached to it. So there's all external pressure that's coming, there. And I mean, when I was working in QA, I didn't necessarily have visibility into all of that's going on. I'm just being told that I have a schedule that has me coming in at 8 a.m. and has me leaving at question mark.
Let's be honest. It's beyond bad planning. It's just bad leadership. It is the publisher who goes home at 7 o'clock because that's a late night for that person. The publisher producer, that's late for me. I stayed at 7 p.m. because Travis promised I was gonna have a bill by 5, and it came in at 6:30. I ain't gonna look at the shit until next Monday anyway. But it don't matter. He told me Friday at 5 I would have it. And I was gonna give it an hour, make some fake notes to say I got your bill. And that's what I initially saw.
Look at all this publishing producer hate. That's
first of all.
Very
listen.
Yeah, and then that person goes home, and then the internal producer.
I leave at 5. I'll have you know, and that's leaving by example.
First of all, Chuck.
The internal producer agrees with that person. We're still gonna get it done. We're still gonna get. Just say nah. It's not gonna get done. Yes. Y'all know I'm right. Don't say I'm wrong. Y'all know I'm right.
Well, I mean, but like, here's the thing, right? Like this, like everything that everyone's saying here is absolutely true, right? But it's also why making games is really hard because, like, yeah, we do have the time box and we do have those schedules and we do have the game has to be out by holiday. You know why? Because if the game is not out by holiday, you ain't gonna make back any of that money. And guess what? Sequels? Nah. You'll be lucky if 50% of you have a job in 6 months, right? So like that's why it's like our industry is so hit driven. Still, I think it's starting to switch off of that a little bit because it's
Yeah.
unsustainable right now. But
Yeah.
we're still very much a hit-driven industry. We're like games have gotten like there's around like 2012 or something like that. There was like sort of a segmentation, like a major sort of rift that opened up within the game industry, where you had these AA and AAA games that were in like the $30 to $60 million range, and that almost became like yucky, and you suddenly started seeing games get much smaller. So our indie space got like started becoming a real thing, and that's where I think the creativity of the industry really lies. And then you started seeing games get much bigger, to a point where I don't even refer to like your Destinies and your Halos and your Overwatch. Those aren't AAA games. Those are quad A games. Your budget is $100 million plus. Like that's the floor for like your budget, and we're talking about 500, 600, 800, 1,000 plus people working on your game. Like those are planet-sized games, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, like understanding like what it takes to recoup on an investment like that, because we were putting $100 million into a game, and you got 1,000 people working on it, and you miss your launch window. Like it's massive, and it just shows a business model that needs to change, because the alternative to making sure you hit that launch window is burning people like alive, essentially. I did a talk I'll say one last little thing real quick. I know I've been talking for a bit. I did a talk like I mentioned last September for the Game Devs of Color, that was talking about how we're killing game dev heroics, right? Like how we're just killing ourselves on this industry. And one of the really interesting bits that I got when I was researching this whole thing was pulled from the game developer conference does like a state of the industry survey every year, right? And they just ask a bunch of anonymous questions, and literally thousands of people respond back to it. And the interesting thing that came out of it was like, so the average game developer has 3 to 6 years of experience. 3 to 6 years. Industry is like over 30 years old. We have 3 to 6 years experience. Average game developer with 3 to 6 years of experience will leave the industry in less than 10 years. They won't, like, they might stay in tech. They might go somewhere where they have better work-life balance. They might go do something completely different, but they will leave, and they will take all that experience with them. So we're constantly in this state of relearning everything that we learned already, because we are pushing people out of the industry. Like they had a great quote in it, said the development is industry driven by young workers who tend to depart within a decade. Like that's none of us. We're the weird exceptions.
Yeah.
No, I did leave after 12 years, but I was burned out. I was tired.
Yeah.
I was working live operations, and I mean, at least for live operation, because that's the other thing, right? Like games don't end now. Like there used to be like an end to games. Now it's like, oh, now you switch to the live operations.
Yeah, projects do not end.
Yeah, I was on the live operations team. I was getting, calls at like 3 in the morning, because it's like, oh, something's going on with like the exchange, and like, this person's spamming naked Sims on the Sims exchange. We need somebody.
Ryan, why were you doing that?
Yeah, Ryan, why are you putting naked Sims on the Sims exchange?
He's doing it from WhatsApp.
I need a reference.
I mean, you do have to account for so many things now. I mean, it's not just that we are having to like create new content, but then you've got like everything that comes with online, not just making sure that there's an actual like stable like online experience, but then you have people who will purposely try and grieve other players or just disrupt their experience because they, because trolls exist, right? So it's very complicated.
Let me try to inject a little
okay?
Good
ray of sunshine.
Hey, don't talk about griefers.
No.
They have a place in my heart.
No, all I'm saying is that I think that either fortunately or unfortunately, we are in a beta society now, right? We're in an age where I think almost every man, woman, child, and maybe part beast recognizes that software comes to you iteratively, right? And is subject to change and updates on a constant basis. Okay. And I think that when we start talking about, crunches, when we start talking about how we burn people out, a lot of times it's by setting unrealistic expectations about what a software has to accomplish within a set amount of time. Okay. when people start getting used to the iterative nature of software, maybe there can be some sort of cessation between people's expectations and what is delivered in such where people will say, well, it is here now, okay, and it has X amount of functionality, but 2 revs from now, you know, come check with us. See what it's like, right? And I think that's a luxury that software developers have not really enjoyed ever. And I think it is that feeling is not only pervasive, but I think in some ways expected nowadays.
I agree with all of that. I think it's interesting, like how we moved into this sort of iterative space of software. Because I mean, like probably all of us on this call remember, like we were in the industry back before there was a such thing as a patch, at least in the console.
Yes.
It was kind of glorious. It was like you made your game, you tested it, you tossed it over the fence, you're like, good luck, everyone. Hope it's good. If it's not,
we'll see you in the next one. We'll see you on the next one.
Yes.
We'll see you on the next one.
yeah. Now it's like, I mean, like legitimately, folks, like we'll make a game, and as soon as we like send it to Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, or whatever platform, like as soon as they're doing their revisions on it and they're like looking at it, we're already working on the day zero patch. Already know there is stuff that needs to be fixed.
We're doing the day zero patch.
Mm-hmm.
Like this build works good enough. We know this stuff needs to get fixed.
And it used to be that those would just be bugs, right? But now like those are full features, right? So we're like, it's back. We're talking about scope. We're talking about scheduling. We're talking about what a certain set of humans can achieve within a set period of time, and we're not good at that. Like
at all.
I think when
five most dangerous words in game development. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Here's something to ponder, right? Think about the original Halo, right? On the original Xbox, and how much that was played multiplayer in dorms and in offices and things like that. That game was never patched.
Yeah.
Crazy, man.
That was pre-Xbox Live. That game never received a single patch.
And there were bugs, and there were things that didn't work, and
we just lived with it.
Somehow
we lived with it.
Everybody was okay.
Like nobody died. It was weird.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would love to talk more about like some of the sort of cultural problems and stuff that we tackle in the industry that do lead to because it's a really big problem, right? Like we talked about like a lot of the external forces. We talked about not being able to scope stuff, but there's also internal forces within our industry that push people out, and that goes to things like pay and stability and culture and overtime and just the fit and the people and personalities and how we treat folks. Like there's a very disposable nature to a lot of disciplines within our industry. Specifically, like a lot of art disciplines are seen as like, yeah, we're just gonna hire you for like a project, 6 months or something. And it's like, try and like, have a life on a 6 months. I wonder if I'll be able to keep my job after this thing is done.
Yeah. You only have a mortgage 6 months of the year, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you just talk to the bank. The bank's like, oh yeah, cool. You're in the game industry. All right, cool. I'll just call you for the next year.
Yeah, QA as well. I mean, QA was always, not only were we disposable, but they would play people off of each other. It'd be like, hey, if you don't want to stay, then I can find somebody else because they make it fun, right? It's a fun job. I can get anybody, So we definitely need to do like
I think the that is becoming less of a bargaining tool now. And it's just because now when your budgets are like 100+ million, it's like I can replace you tomorrow. Okay, hotshot, let's see you do it.
Go do it.
Do it.
I dare you. Go ahead.
If anything even remotely positive came out of like this pandemic thing, it is the realization that remote work is like actually a thing that we can do and we can build successful projects, and that I think opens up a lot of space for people who ordinarily couldn't get in this industry or couldn't afford to move to one of the expensive coasts to be able to work in games.
There's industries, entire industries now that like where they think people need to be in the offices because they're so old and you send people in offices. So you got CEOs and stuff saying we can't wait to get all y'all back in office next month, and you have CTOs come with follow-up emails. Wait, hold up. We're not gonna get any of
Yeah,
y'all
like,
back in office.
That
Yeah,
Y'all
part.
stay at home. I'll
'Cause
talk
folks
to the
will find remote jobs.
CEO. I'll
Yeah.
talk to the CEO, and they'll
I
go
haven't
CEO.
had-
Like we'll lose all our tech people because they're more productive at home. Number one, productivity's gone up 30% across all tech industries, and number two is so and so moved back to Nebraska around his mother. And there's no way I'm going to get him to come back onto the West Coast.
That
Well,
part.
It's so very
and,
true.
and to that point, the number of recruiters that call me
Mhm.
that said, "Hey, I know you said you couldn't move before, but hey, right?" That is a large number of recruiters in the past year, at least every 3 weeks.
There's a power shift from companies into
Yeah.
employees right
companies.
now, and I'm
Yeah.
That's
The way-
exactly what's going on in
I'm
my,
here for
my
it.
neighborhood. I have neighbors right now that moved from San Francisco down to where I'm at because it's just way cheaper to live in this area. And they actually bought up a lot of homes and they actually raised the prices of the other homes around it
Yeah.
too. So my home
Congratulations, Ryan.
Yeah,
$250,000
congratulations.
It's called gentrification,
Yeah.
Ryan. That's what we
Yes,
call
it
it.
in 1 month. Like, really?
You're one of the few
Great.
black people who actually got
Benefited from
got to come up on
gentrification.
gentrification.
Yeah, congratulations.
moving on up.
So I can work from home. I'm moving. I'm out of here.
All right, folks. Well, this has been an awesome conversation, and I know we got to come back to this one because I mean, there's so much to dive into. As Shanae was just mentioning, there's so many there's so much depth to this particular story. We got to come back to this here, but. I will say, fabulous conversation. Thanks everybody. Love the contributions like that. I do want to just go ahead and close this out. We've hit 2 p.m. So let me just go ahead and give a shout out to Digital Click for all the creative that they do for each and every show. And if you want to learn more about about Technubians, then make sure you hit up our website, technubians.com. That's techn00bians.com. Please follow us here on Twitch. And if you like our vibe, and we know you do, and you want to learn more about game development and everything else geek, please consider subscribing to the channel and follow us on all our socials. We're Geekish Network is on all major platforms. Check out the schedule for all the shows on the Geekish Network here on our Twitch page. Tonight we have Pod Squadron. Tomorrow we have Nerdtastic. So anyways, thank you all for watching, and we will see you all next week. Bye, everyone.
Peace.
Peace.